remember that morning with a cruel, surgical clarity, the kind that only comes when something deep inside you fractures for good. The sun was low and pale, an indifferent observer spilling its cold light across the pavement as I turned onto the driveway. I hadn't called. I was never the type to intrude, but that morning, the kitchen had been filled with the warm, cinnamon scent of a fresh apple pie. I had baked it for Amaya, my daughter-in-law. I thought of her often. How young she was, how much she seemed to need a mother's touch. God, how naive I was. I thought a surprise visit would be a kindness. Her house was a portrait of domestic peace. The white picket fence, the rhythm of the porch swing, the vibrant hanging flower pots. It should have felt like a sanctuary, but as I pulled to the curb, an icy stillness spread through my veins. Parked right beside the front steps was a silver SUV. I knew every scratch on its bumper, the specific tint of its windows. It was Frank's, my husband's. For a moment, my mind raced for excuses. Maybe he was dropping off a tool. Maybe he'd lent the car to our son. But Frank hadn't mentioned visiting Amaya. Not today. Not ever. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned a ghostly white, staring at that car as if I could make it disappear by sheer will. I stepped out. The gravel crunched beneath my shoes, a sound that felt violent in the morning silence. As I neared the house, a sound drifted through the open kitchen window. Laughter. It was hers, light and melodic, and then his. A low, intimate chuckle. It was a sound Frank hadn't directed at me in over a decade. I should have turned back. I should have spared my soul the trauma that was waiting just inches away. But my feet moved on their own, heavy as lead, until I was huddled beneath the window. "You're late," Amaya's voice came first, playful and teasing. "I thought maybe your wife was finally keeping you busy." Then came Frank's voice, unguarded and warm. "Don't start, Amaya. You know how careful we have to be. If our son ever finds out, we're done." The world didn't explode. It didn't end with a bang. It ended with a cold, brutal silence that echoed inside my skull. Their son. The pie slipped from my numb fingers. It hit the driveway with a soft, wet thud, crust and apples scattering in the dirt. I didn't flinch. I just listened to the rushing sound in my ears like a dam breaking. I heard chairs scraping inside, more muffled laughter, and then the words that would haunt my dreams. "She'll never suspect. She trusts both of us." I don't remember the drive home. I only remember the smell of burnt coffee in my own kitchen hours later. I was still wearing my coat. My hands were sticky with syrup. I looked at the framed photos on the wall. The four of us. Amaya's smile in those pictures made my stomach twist into knots. How many years had I been the fool at the center of their masterpiece? When midnight finally came, Frank walked through the door. He kissed my forehead, smelling of gardenia perfume and faint smoke. He smiled at me with the face of a man who had done nothing wrong. "You okay?" he asked. And that was the moment. He wasn't sorry. He wasn't even afraid. "I'm fine," I said. My voice was steady, even as my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. He nodded, poured a drink, and turned on the TV. Just another Tuesday. But for me, the world had shifted off its axis. The next morning, the house felt like a tomb. Frank left for meetings, and I watched his silver SUV disappear down the street. I stood at the sink, staring at my reflection. The woman looking back was pale, a stranger with red eyes and a mouth set in a grim, hard line. I realized then that Frank had built his empire on my trust, and Amaya had built her life on my kindness. They both mistook my silence for weakness. I sat at my desk and opened a blank notebook. I didn't write a letter of despair. I wrote a list. Bank accounts, property deeds, business records. It wasn't about revenge yet. It was about survival. It was about reclaiming the ground they had stolen from under me. A week later, I stood in a lawyer's office. Michael, a man with tired, honest eyes, looked over the documents I had spent nights gathering in secret. "Is there someone else?" he asked. "Yes," I whispered. I had found the proof. Not just the affair but the paper trail. Frank and Amaya weren't just sharing a bed. They were moving money. My son's inheritance. My security. They were hollowed-out people, picking at the bones of a family I had spent 30 years building. When the confrontation finally came, it wasn't a shouting match. It was a cold realization. Frank and Amaya showed up at my door together, trying to play the victims, trying to gaslight me into believing I was the one who was unstable. "You've lived off my money for decades," Frank hissed, the mask finally slipping to reveal the venom beneath. "You won't survive this on your own." I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized I didn't love him anymore. I didn't even hate him. He was just a small man standing in a large shadow. "Watch me," I said. As they walked away, I felt a strange, terrifying lightness. They had taken everything that used to define me: wife, mother, peacekeeper. And in doing so, they had accidentally set me free. They had created someone entirely new. Someone they couldn't manipulate. The war is far from over. There are lawyers to face and a son whose heart I must eventually, gently, break with the truth. But as I sit on my porch tonight, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I am no longer afraid of the dark. I am the one holding the light now. I want to thank you for walking through this shadow with me. If this story touched you, would you like me to write the next chapter of how the truth was finally revealed to my son? The cottage is quiet now, the kind of quiet that doesn't feel lonely but sacred. It's been a year since the gavel fell, and the dust has finally settled on the ruins of my old life. I'm sitting on the porch, watching the first frost of winter turn the world into a landscape of silver. In my hand is a letter from Frank. It's been sitting on my side table for 3 days, unopened. I know what's in it. Pleas for forgiveness, complaints about his health, perhaps a request for money. I don't feel the urge to read it. I don't even feel the urge to burn it. Just paper. Has no power here. Leo comes over every Sunday. He's different now, sturdier, more reflective. The betrayal changed him, yes, but it didn't harden him into a cynical man. It just taught him where to place his trust. Today he brought a small wooden crate. He's taken up woodworking, something Frank always said was a waste of time. Leo pulled out a hand-carved sign for my garden. It simply says, "Marilyn's Sanctuary." "I realized something this week, Mom," he said as he hammered the sign into the frozen earth. "I spent so long trying to be the perfect son for a man who wasn't even a shadow of what I thought he was. I forgot to just be me." I watched him, his breath blooming in the cold air, and I realized that this was the real settlement of the divorce. Not the house or the bank accounts, but this moment of honesty with the person I love most. I heard through a mutual friend that Amaya moved 3 states away. She's working in a real estate office, trying to start over. I hope she finds whatever it was she was looking for in my husband's arms, though I doubt she ever will. You cannot build a home on someone else's wreckage and expect the foundation to hold. As for Frank, he calls Leo sometimes. Leo answers out of a sense of duty, but the conversations are short. Frank talks about the good old days, living in a past that he himself destroyed. It's a sad way to live, haunted by the ghosts of your own making. The strength in the scars. People often ask me how I survived it, how I stayed so calm when the world was screaming. I tell them the truth. You survive because you have to. There is a reservoir of strength inside every person that stays hidden until the moment the floor gives way. When you find yourself in the basement of your own life, you have 2 choices. You can sit in the dark and wait for the end, or you can start looking for the stairs. Found the stairs. They were steep, and the wood was splintered, but they led me here. Tonight, as the sun dips below the horizon, I'm not thinking about the betrayal. I'm not thinking about the silver SUV or the whispers through the kitchen window. I'm thinking about the woman I was 30 years ago. I want to tell her that she was always enough. I want to tell her that her kindness wasn't a flaw, but a gift, even if it was given to people who didn't deserve it. I am 63 years old. My hair is grayer, my eyes are tired, and my heart has more stitches than a handmade quilt. But I have never been more beautiful than I am right now, standing in the light of my own truth. The story doesn't end with a happily ever after. It ends with a happily ever forward. And for me, that is more than enough. Thank you for listening to my story until the very end. Your presence has been a comfort to me as I looked back on these difficult years. Before we part ways, is there a specific part of my journey that resonated with you the most, or a story of your own strength you'd like to share?